Hey everybody, Brett Thompson here, Thompson Law Group, World Headquarters. It is Tuesday, so we're doing another Teaching Tuesday. I've had some questions in regards to fair housing laws. I've had some brokers, some agents give us a call, say, Brett, will you do a teaching video on that subject? And I said, yes, I will. So here we are. All right, fair housing laws. So the federal government back in 1968 passed some fair housing law acts in regards to other human rights acts, if you will. And they created protected classes. So there are certain protected classes that you cannot discriminate against on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, familial status. Primarily like anybody under 18 years old. You can't discriminate because somebody has kids, for example. Virginia also has a fair housing statute, which actually is a little broader than the federal statute. Virginia also goes into age, so you can't discriminate in regards to the elderly over 55. Sources of income you can't discriminate on. An example of that would be like if someone receives Section 8 vouchers for low-income housing, you cannot discriminate because someone wants to pay via that form of payment. Also, we have a lot of military bases here in Virginia, and so, for example, a landlord cannot discriminate based on whether someone is in the military or not. So, what does all that mean? Basically, so you cannot discriminate in regards to housing as it pertains to these protected classes. So, an example, what you cannot do, you cannot refuse to sell or rent to someone because they're in a particular protected class. You can't offer different terms, conditions, or services based on the class that this particular person may fall into. You can't advertise in a different way that excludes a protected class. You can't harass, coerce, or steer clients into going into one neighborhood as opposed to another one, for example. You can't deny reasonable accommodations for disabilities. So what's reasonable accommodations? So that is can be encompassed in a whole different video, but I'll just give you two quick examples. So a reasonable accommodation in regards to provisions in a lease would be if you have a blind person and they have been prescribed a seeing eye dog, you cannot discriminate and say that they can't have their seeing eye dog, for example. Also, reasonable accommodations if you have a disabled person, if they wanted to install some railing system or whatnot in the bathroom, for example, on their dime, the law says that you have to comply with that. You have to make reasonable accommodations for example, disabled people. So there are some narrow exemptions, which for your intensive purposes as a broker, as a real estate professional, I would just throw those out. But there are some exemptions to these federal laws, and I'll just touch on them. If it's a residential unit, less than 4 units, and you live in one of the units, there's some exemptions in regards to the fair housing. Also, there are some carve-outs for religious organizations and private clubs on how they can cater in regards to their religious beliefs. And there are, in Virginia as well, there are housing developments that are just for the elderly. So that could be deemed as discrimination, but the courts have ruled that, hey, you could have, for example, a 55 and older community, and that would not violate fair housing because they have picked a particular class of individuals, the elderly, to accommodate. So just some tricks of the trade, if you will, fair practices. Watch how you advertise, all right? So watch what you say in regards to your social media advertising, your print media advertising. Certainly don't say anything like no kids in your advertising, or don't say something like, hey, we prefer Christian tenants. That would be a violation of the federal and state law in regards to protected classes. So you want to use inclusive, welcoming language, and be even across the board, okay? So be as equally accommodating and regardless of the protected class. And so again, these protected classes are race, color, religion, sex, which also includes sexual orientation and gender identity, national origin, where they're from, disability, and familial status, whether they have kids or not. Those are the main ones. And if you're in Virginia also, Elderly, you can't discriminate. You can't discriminate in regards to source of income, such as Section 8 vouchers, and you cannot discriminate if someone is a military personnel. So be cautious out there. Be fair. A lot of this is kind of common sense, but treat everyone equally. Okay, love thy neighbor, if you will, and be fair to everybody. And be a good person. All right, if you're be a good person and you don't discriminate, you got nothing to worry about. We'll talk to you next Tuesday.